So if you struggle with your acrylic paintings looking flat or harsh, some of the tips in this video might help you achieve that smooth, rich oil paint look. Just a disclaimer, this isn't the only way to paint with acrylic paint. This is just the way that works best for me. The way that I paint requires a lot of layering and glazing, so it takes a pretty long time, but I think it's totally worth it due to the result it gives. So let's just get into it. Tip 1 is to keep your shadows and your highlights separate when you're painting. This also applies to oil paintings, but it's important to keep opaque paints or paints with white in them out of your deepest shadows. Sometimes you will feel the need to deepen a shadow because when you're first starting off, it's really hard to judge those values. So that can cause a chalky, flat look to your paintings, and especially to your acrylic paintings, because I think acrylics kind of tend to have that chalky, flat look to them. A great way to train your eye is by squinting, and that will separate the deepest shadows from your brightest highlights. So that was kind of more of a general tip applying to all materials, but I wanted to include that tip in there because being able to judge values is so important in order to create a good painting. Tip 2 is to keep a fine mist water bottle next to you. You can either spray your palette every 10 minutes just to make sure that your paints stay wet, or another thing you can do is you can spray the canvas that you're working on, and that will make sure that the whole surface is wet, so it's a lot easier to blend the paint that you add to it. Acrylic paints are notorious for being very difficult to blend, so it's important to make sure that your acrylic paints are wet but not too wet. If too much water is being mixed into your paint, it can kind of break it down and cause streakiness, and it's even harder to blend that way. So it's really important to find that middle ground when adding water. An important thing to keep in mind is the type of water bottle you're using. You don't want to use a bottle with a condensed stream, or you will have an uneven distribution of water droplets. You'll have like some puddles of water here and the rest won't get wet. So it's really important to have a stream that's like really fine and misty. Tip 3 is to dedicate a brush to just blending. I find it easier sometimes to use two brushes, one for applying the paint and a semi-wet brush to blend the paint that I just added. You don't want your blending brush to be too wet because too much water can add streakiness, like how I mentioned before. So I usually keep my blending brush just slightly damp. This is something that you'll get with practice. It just takes a little bit of time. The reason I use a second brush is because if I use the same brush I use to apply the paint with, sometimes it will just keep adding paint where I don't want more paint. Sometimes I will hold like two brushes at once and I'll just switch hands if I'm ready to blend. Tip 4 is to use a slow dry blending medium or just use better quality acrylic paints. I use this Liquitex slow dry medium. With it being a slow dry medium, it gives you more time to blend your acrylic paint, but you want to make sure that you don't add more than 25% by volume to your paint or it might affect the integrity of it. So just use it sparingly. Another thing you can do is just use artist grade acrylic paints instead of beginner acrylic paints. I do realize though that not everyone can afford expensive paints. I have been painting and probably taking painting seriously for about 5 years, and it took me that long to acquire the collection that I have now. So be patient with yourself. You don't have to buy everything all at once. Just start off with one tube maybe. If you want to experiment with better quality acrylic paints, maybe buy a white tube. And also, you don't have to use expensive paints in order to make a great painting. At the end of the day, it's how you use those materials. But expensive materials sometimes make the process easier. Tip 5 is to be patient with yourself and add a lot of layers. Instead of having to physically blend every single layer and every single thing, sometimes it's best to add just a lot of semi-transparent layers. For every layer that you add, it will blend with the layers beneath it. You're not actually physically blending the paint, but rather the light is passing through those semi-transparent layers of paint, and that's what's kind of giving it the illusion of being blended, if that makes sense. Acrylic inks work perfectly for that, and I would say acrylic ink is probably my favorite art material to use because they're really pigmented and most of them are transparent. But if you look at the bottle of the acrylic ink or acrylic paint, it will show you whether or not it is transparent or opaque. Tip 6 is to use transition shades if you feel like you don't want to blend the crap out of your paint. Blending acrylic paint takes a lot of finessing, the right amount of water, a special amount of patience, that's for sure. If you want to go for more of that brushstroke look, kind of more of that graphic look, you're not really worried about and you're not really worried about blending every single thing, which I personally like it when there are some parts that are blended and some parts of a painting that aren't blended. You could just incorporate transition shades into your paintings. So for instance, if you want to incorporate a catch light on an eyeball, you can start off with like a dusty blue highlight that's pretty transparent, and then you can just keep adding layers on top of that that go lighter, so then you give it the effect of it glowing, and you don't even have to do much blending that way. The transitions alone will give the illusion of a glowing highlight. Whew, that was a lot of talking. I'm still working on talking to the camera and I get so frustrated sometimes, but we made it to the end of the video. So yeah, I hope you found this video informational. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them down below. And of course, I have a shop and a Patreon if you would like to support me on there. I plan on making some exclusive content for my Patreon, so yeah. And also let me know what you would like to see for future videos. I'm still trying to figure out where I want to be with this channel. So yeah, also I'm almost to 500 subscribers, so that is super cool. If you want to subscribe and support my channel, I would be so happy. I have been loving making videos lately, and I love the little community that I'm building here. So yeah, thank you for watching and making it to the end of this video, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!